In 1989, Lucille Ball died, with almost nobody by her side. The star, who once commanded 44 million viewers every Monday night, spent her last years in crushing loneliness. Her mansions sat empty except for hired help. Her children stayed away. Even her famous Hollywood friends disappeared one by one. What turned America's most beloved comedian into a forgotten recluse? The answer involves money, betrayal, and a family secret that destroyed everything she built. Lucille Ball's life started with heartbreak. When she was just 3 years old, her father died from typhoid fever. It happened in February 1915. He was only 27, and her mother was pregnant with Lucille's younger brother. The family had been moving around a lot because of her father's job with the phone company. They'd lived in New York, New Jersey, Montana, and finally ended up in Michigan, where the illness struck. After her father passed, everything fell apart. Her mother became depressed and couldn't take care of the kids. Lucille was sent to live with her aunt, and her baby brother went to stay with their grandparents. Lucille would later say that her childhood was shaped by loss and bad luck. One moment from that time stuck with her forever. Right after her mother told her that her father had died, a picture fell off the wall. Then Lucille noticed birds, small gray sparrows, pecking at the kitchen window. It was a strange detail, but it burned itself into her memory. From that day on, she was terrified of birds. Not the live ones so much, but pictures, drawings, anything that reminded her of them. Even in her adult life, no matter how famous she became, she refused to stay in hotel rooms that had bird wallpaper or paintings. That fear stayed with her to the very end. Just as things started to settle, disaster hit again. When Lucille was about 12, there was an accident in the backyard. Her stepfather had set up a safe place for target practice with a .22 rifle. He was careful with rules and only let the kids shoot toward an empty field. But a young neighbor boy, just 8 years old, showed up and wasn't supposed to be there. As another child took a shot, the boy suddenly stood up and was hit by the bullet. It struck his spine and left him paralyzed for life. The boy's family sued and won. Lucille's family lost everything: their home, their furniture, even their insurance. Her grandfather, crushed by guilt, never worked again. They were forced to leave town. Lucille later said that a single accident shattered their life as a family. Then came another storm. Lucille Ball was only 14 when she fell for a 21-year-old local troublemaker named Johnny DeVita. Her mother didn't like it one bit. So, in a bold move, she scraped together what little money she had and sent Lucille to a top drama school in New York City, hoping to steer her daughter away from the wrong path. It didn't go well. Lucille ended up in the same class as Bette Davis, but their futures couldn't have looked more different. While Davis thrived, Lucille struggled. The teachers didn't sugarcoat anything. They told her flat out she didn't have what it took. One story says they even gave her mother's money back and told Lucille she had no talent. Years later, Lucille admitted that all she learned there was how to be scared. But that rejection didn't break her. It lit a fire. She came back to New York in 1928, still chasing her dream, determined to prove everyone wrong. Then, just as things were starting to click, she got sick. Rheumatic fever. It hit hard. For 2 years, she could barely move, let alone perform. She was stuck in bed, watching time slip away during the years that should have built her career. Most people would have quit. Lucille didn't. She thought about everything the teachers had said, but instead of giving up, she got tougher. When she finally recovered, she came back more focused than ever. Around that same time, she landed a modeling job with designer Hattie Carnegie. It was a big deal. Carnegie saw something in Lucille but insisted on one major change. She had to bleach her brown hair blonde. Lucille didn't hesitate. She changed her look, learned how to carry herself in fancy gowns, and soaked up everything about elegance and presence. It was a whole new kind of training, one that acting school never gave her. Even though she was still dreaming of the stage, modeling helped her sharpen how she moved, how she looked, how she held an audience without saying a word. She used that polish when she went back to chasing acting roles. They weren't glamorous. Through the 30s and early 40s, Lucille took whatever she could get: background parts, forgettable leads, slapstick comedies. She acted in over 75 movies but never broke through to the top tier. Hollywood labeled her the Queen of the Bs, and though she joked about it, calling herself the Queen of the B+, it stung. No matter how hard she worked, the studios tried to fit her into into boxes that didn't quite suit her. Flapper, glamour girl, comic sidekick. Still, she kept going. The roles may not have been great, but they gave her something even better: experience. She learned every corner of the business, figured out what worked and what didn't, and slowly built the skills that would one day let her take over the screen. Not as someone else's idea of a star, but on her own terms. Lucille Ball met Desi Arnaz on the set of a movie called Too Many Girls in 1940. She was already a well-known actress, and he was a young band leader just getting started in Hollywood. The moment they met, something clicked. Desi walked right up to her and asked if she knew how to rumba. Then he showed her a few moves and said, "I can teach you quickly, but only if you go out with me tonight." Lucille was hooked. Later she said she'd never fallen in love so fast. Desi was charming, handsome, and full of energy. The people working on the movie noticed the sparks right away. Some even started betting on how long the relationship would last. It seemed too fast, too intense to be real, but Lucille couldn't stay away. She said he scared her a little. He was wild, unpredictable, and that's what drew her in even more. When the film wrapped, they kept things going with long-distance phone calls, expensive ones. Lucille guessed she spent around $29,000 just talking to him. A few months later, in November 1940, they were both in New York. Desi was performing at a theater, and Lucille was doing a magazine interview. In that interview, she said it would never work, talking about their relationship. But later that day, after a fight about Desi seeing another woman, she showed up at his place, furious. That argument ended with a surprise. Desi asked her to marry him. They got in a car and drove to Connecticut, where they eloped that night, just 6 months after meeting. Their marriage shocked a lot of people. In the 1940s, Hollywood wasn't kind to interracial couples. Studios didn't think a Cuban man and a white woman could work, on screen or off. Years later, when Lucille wanted to bring her radio show to television, CBS pushed back when she insisted Desi play her husband. They didn't think the audience would accept it, but Lucille stood her ground. Looking back, she called their elopement the most daring thing I ever did. Her friends thought it wouldn't last. She admitted, "They gave it 6 months. I gave it 6 weeks." But right after the honeymoon, trouble started creeping in. Desi traveled a lot with his band. Lucille was up early for work, and he was out late playing shows. Their schedules barely crossed. Then there were the deeper issues. Desi had grown up in a world where cheating wasn't really seen as wrong. His own father had taken him to a brothel when he was just 12. He believed that sleeping around didn't mean he wasn't loyal to Lucille emotionally, but for Lucille, it was painful. Add to that his growing drinking problem, and the cracks in their marriage started to show. Even before they married, people had warned her. Desi had a reputation with women from coast to coast. By 1944, just 4 years in, Lucille had had enough. She filed for divorce. Their fights were loud and constant. Their daughter Lucy later said her childhood was full of yelling. But even after filing the papers, Lucille and Desi couldn't stay apart. They got back together in what some called a fiery reunion. This wasn't the last time they'd break up and try again. It became a pattern. Still, they had one more idea. If working apart pulled them apart, maybe working together would hold them together. In 1950, CBS wanted to turn Lucille Ball's popular radio show, My Favorite Husband, into a TV series. But Lucy surprised them. She said she would only do it if her real-life husband, Desi Arnaz, played her husband on the show too. The network didn't like the idea. Desi was Cuban. He had a strong accent. And they didn't think American viewers would accept him as the husband of an all-American woman. At the time, interracial marriages were rarely seen on television, and in many U.S. states, they were still illegal. But Lucy didn't back down. To prove they could work as a team, she and Desi put together a live stage act. They toured the country doing comedy bits and musical performances. Audiences loved them. Critics loved them. Their chemistry was undeniable. The tour was such a hit that CBS finally gave in. They agreed to cast Desi, and I Love Lucy was born. Getting the show made, though, wasn't easy. CBS wanted it filmed in New York, where most TV shows were produced, but Lucy refused to leave Hollywood. That choice changed television forever. Working with producer Jess Oppenheimer, Desi helped develop a new way to film, using 3 cameras at once in front of a live studio audience. It was risky. They had to find a studio that could meet safety rules while fitting in an audience. Eventually, they found one in Hollywood and fixed it up with CBS's help. This filming method made a big difference. It let actors perform scenes straight through, like a play, instead of stopping and starting over and over. It also captured real laughter and reactions from the audience. On top of that, Desi insisted they use high-quality high-quality 35mm film instead of the blurry tape most shows used at the time. That decision turned out to be genius. Lucy and Desi took a pay cut in exchange for owning the episodes through their company, Desilu. Because the episodes were filmed in such high quality, they could be re-aired for decades, making I Love Lucy one of the first big syndication success stories. In 1952, the show hit another hurdle. Lucy became pregnant with their second child. At the time, it was considered inappropriate to show or even mention pregnancy on television. CBS and the show's sponsor, Philip Morris, were not happy. They told Desi it couldn't be shown on screen. But once again, Lucy and Desi stood firm. They didn't want to hide her behind props or avoid the topic completely. Instead, the writers came up with a clever workaround. They would include her pregnancy in the story, but never say the word pregnant. They used softer terms like expecting or with child. One episode even used the French word enceinte. To be safe, they had religious leaders review the script. When the episode where Lucy gives birth aired in January 1953, the same day Lucy had her baby in real life, 44 million people tuned in. The story goes that water use across the country dropped during the broadcast because no one wanted to miss a minute. After that, I Love Lucy became unstoppable. For 4 of its 6 seasons, it was the most watched show in the country. When the show ended in 1957, it was still at the top of the ratings, something only 2 other shows have done since: The Andy Griffith Show and Seinfeld. Lucy won an Emmy for Best Comedian. Desi and Oppenheimer won Emmys too. In total, the show won 5 Emmys and became a landmark in TV history. Even long after it ended, I Love Lucy kept reaching new audiences. Reruns aired around the world. In 2012, a poll named it the best TV show of all time. In 2013, a colorized version of a Christmas episode drew over 8 million viewers in a single night. More than 60 years after it began, Lucy and Desi's show was still making people laugh. Behind the scenes, the couple launched their own company, Desilu Productions. Within a few years, it was the largest independent TV studio in the country. They bought RKO Studios for $6 million and began producing shows like The Untouchables, The Andy Griffith Show, and The Dick Van Dyke Show. All of this started because 2 people wanted to stay close and believed in what they were building. But by 1960, Lucy and Desi's marriage had ended. What surprised everyone was what happened next. Lucy bought out Desi's shares for $2.5 million and became the boss of Desilu. At that time, no woman had ever run a major Hollywood studio. Many people doubted her. They said she was just a comedian, not a business leader. But Lucy proved them wrong. While still starring in The Lucy Show, she was making tough executive decisions, managing big budgets, negotiating deals, and planning for the future. She even started a syndication company within Desilu to handle reruns, something almost no one was thinking about at the time. Then, in 1966, Lucy made one of her boldest moves. She approved 2 expensive new shows that no one else believed in: Star Trek and Mission Impossible. Her team told her the shows were too risky, too expensive, and too strange, but Lucy trusted her gut. At one point, she even misunderstood Star Trek, thinking it was about celebrities going on tour. Still, she saw something special in it, and she was right. Both shows became classics. By early 1967, Desilu was thriving again. Lucy sold the studio for $17 million, walking away with a massive return and a legacy as one of the sharpest minds in television. Long before all of that, Lucy and Desi had made another quiet but groundbreaking choice. When CBS wanted them to film I Love Lucy live in New York, they insisted on staying in California. They offered to take a pay cut if they could film the show on 35mm. That one decision changed everything. It made reruns possible. It created the syndication industry, and it made I Love Lucy a show that would keep earning money for decades. Even now, more than 70 years later, it's estimated to have made over $700 million in rerun revenue. Lucille Ball didn't just make people laugh, she changed the way television works, and she did it by taking risks, trusting herself, and never backing down. In September 1953, something happened that almost ruined Lucille Ball's career. It started with a rumor, one dropped casually on a national radio show by gossip reporter Walter Winchell. He asked, what red-headed TV star was once a communist? He didn't name her, but everyone knew who he meant. The next morning, reporters were already outside Lucille and Desi's house, waiting for a story. That same day, the Los Angeles Herald-Express ran a giant headline in red ink: Lucille Ball named Red. Other papers picked it up fast. Suddenly, America's favorite comedian, star of the most watched show on TV, was being called a communist. This wasn't just gossip. Back then, being linked to communism could destroy your life. People were losing their jobs and getting blacklisted. I Love Lucy had 44 million viewers. The sponsors had poured millions into it. And now it all hung in the balance because of something Lucille Ball had done almost 20 years earlier. She had registered to vote as a communist in 1936, but it wasn't because she believed in it. She did it to make her grandfather happy. He had raised her, and he believed in workers' rights. She was trying to keep the peace in the family. But now, that decision was coming back to haunt her. She sat down with a government investigator and explained everything. She was scared but honest. She said she had never been involved in any communist meetings. Yes, her name had come up once before. Someone said there had been a meeting at her house back in the 30s, but Lucille said she didn't even know about it. Her brother backed her up too. They both said it was all just to please their grandfather, not because they believed in any political movement. While Lucille was dealing with the fear of losing everything, Desi Arnaz wasn't sitting still. He took action. He invited reporters into their home, sat them down, and told them exactly what had happened. He said Lucille wasn't a communist and never had been, but he didn't stop there. During the filming of the new season's first episode, he did something even bolder. With reporters sitting in the audience and tension in the air, Desi spoke to them from the stage. He told them he had made a phone call and had someone on the line. Then he held the phone up to the microphone. It was J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, and Hoover said it loud and clear: Lucille Ball was not a communist. The crowd burst into applause. The room was electric. Desi had cleared her name in front of the entire country, but he still had one more thing to say. With his voice shaking, he looked at the crowd and said, "Now I want you to meet my favorite redhead. And the only thing red about her is her hair, and even that's not legitimate." The joke landed. The tension broke, and Lucille, tears in her eyes, stepped into the spotlight. The audience roared. Not long after, Lucille Ball was named Woman of the Year. She and Desi were invited to dinner at the White House. The scandal had nearly destroyed her, but with truth, boldness, and a little bit of humor, they had turned it around together. After her long and painful divorce from Desi Arnaz in 1960, Lucille Ball had no plans to marry again. She was 49, tired, and heartbroken. But that all changed one night in New York. A friend set her up on a blind date with a nightclub comic named Gary Morton. Lucille was performing on Broadway at the time, and the date took place at a pizza place. Not exactly glamorous, but it worked. Gary was 13 years younger than Lucille, and he claimed he had never seen I Love Lucy. He was always working on Monday nights when it aired. That actually impressed Lucille. It meant he wasn't dazzled by her fame. They started dating, and 11 months later, they got married. The ceremony was small, only about 40 guests, but when they left the church, a huge crowd was waiting outside. People were cheering, "Good luck, Lucy." In letters she wrote later, Lucille couldn't stop talking about how happy she was. She said Gary was kind, funny, handsome, and loving. She felt lucky to have found him. Their marriage lasted almost 28 years, until the day she died. When they met, Lucille had just started her one and only Broadway show, Wildcat. It was supposed to be a big success, but nothing went as planned. A snowstorm delayed opening night because the trucks carrying the sets got stuck on the highway. Her company, Desilu Productions, had invested a lot of money in the show, and the pressure was high. Audiences expected to see her act like Lucy Ricardo from TV, but the role was very different. So Lucille started changing her performance, adding jokes and facial expressions that reminded people of her TV character. It didn't help. Reviews were not great, and the stress took a toll on her health. She got sick, and sometimes the show had to shut down. Then, one night in April, she collapsed on stage. They tried to pause the show so she could recover, but the musicians' union said they still had to be paid. The costs were too high, and the show closed for good after just 171 performances. It was a rough moment in her career. Things didn't get easier at home. In 1970, Lucille's teenage son, Desi Jr., started dating actress Patty Duke. Patty was 23. 3, and Lucille didn't approve at all. Ironically, she had once been 6 years older than Desi Sr. when they got married, but now she was furious about her son's relationship. She gave him harsh ultimatums. If he didn't end it, he'd be kicked out of the house, out of the will, cut off entirely. Desi Jr. believed his mom was mostly worried about protecting the family's image. Patty said she didn't hold a grudge, but she was deeply hurt. She felt she had good intentions and didn't deserve to be treated like a threat. On top of everything, she was struggling with mental health issues and also dating other people, including actor John Astin. Still, the relationship with Desi Jr. kept going, off and on. Then came the scandal. Patty got pregnant shortly after marrying a man named Michael Tell. The marriage lasted only 13 days, but rumors started flying that Desi Jr. was the real father. Lucille was horrified. After years of carefully building a wholesome public image, this was the last thing she wanted. Patty admitted later that she let people believe Desi was the father, even though she knew he wasn't. She didn't lie, but she also didn't correct the story. The press went wild. When she gave birth to her son, Sean, in 1971, the hospital had to hide his name to keep reporters away. Desi Sr. and Lucy, Desi Jr.'s sister, visited the baby. Lucille did not. Years later, DNA tests showed Michael Tell was Sean's real father, but Desi Jr. stayed in Sean's life. Despite everything, they had a bond. Still, the damage was done. The headlines, the gossip, the drama, it all became exactly what Lucille had feared. Her family's name had been dragged through a scandal she couldn't control. After I Love Lucy ended in 1957, most people expected Lucille Ball's career to fade, but Lucy wasn't done. Not even close. In 1962, she came back with a new show, The Lucy Show, and to everyone's surprise, it became even more popular than her last one. By 1968, she was riding high again, but made a surprising move. She walked away. She'd sold her company, Desilu, and didn't want to keep working on something she no longer owned, so she started fresh with a new production company and a new series. Here's Lucy. This time, it was personal. She cast her real-life children, Lucy and Desi Jr., to play her kids on the show. She said she wouldn't do it unless they were part of it. The show tried to speak to a new generation, touching on civil rights, rock music, and changing social norms. It was Lucy's attempt to stay relevant in a changing world, but by 1973, ratings were slipping. Her daughter Lucy left for a Broadway tour, and Lucy herself was eyeing a return to the big screen with Mamie. After 23 years of dominating TV, she finally stepped back. But Lucy had already started facing cracks behind the scenes. Her closest friend and co-star, Vivian Vance, had left The Lucy Show years earlier. Vivian was tired. The long commute from her home on the East Coast to the studio in LA had worn her down. She asked for more money and creative input, but didn't get it. She walked away, and it broke Lucy's heart. Privately, she cried, saying she couldn't imagine doing the show without her. The show's format had to be changed entirely after Vivian left. Years passed. Then, in 1985, at age 74, Lucy did something no one expected. She played a homeless woman in a TV drama called Stone Pillow. She wanted to prove she could do more than comedy. Audiences tuned in, and the ratings were strong. Encouraged, she tried one last sitcom, Life with Lucy. But the world had moved on. The show was panned by critics and canceled after just 8 episodes. It was the first time in her life a show of hers had been pulled mid-season. The failure hit Lucy hard. She stopped appearing in public as much. Her final TV appearance was at the 1989 Oscars, standing beside Bob Hope, getting a standing ovation. That same year, just a month later, Lucille Ball died. But before that, in 1986, something quietly powerful happened. Her ex-husband and former co-star, Desi Arnaz, was dying of cancer. Even though they had divorced decades earlier, their love had never fully gone away. Lucy visited him often. Their daughter, Lucy, later said their bond was still strong, even in the end. On November 30th, 1986, the day that would have been their 46th wedding anniversary, Lucy called Desi. He could barely speak. Lucy held the phone to his ear. Lucy told him she loved him again and again. Desi nodded and said, "I love you too, honey." Then, with what little strength he had left, he told her, "Good luck with your show." 2 days later, Desi died with Lucy by his side. 3 years later, on April 18th, 1989, Lucy was rushed to the hospital with chest pain. Doctors found a tear in her heart's main artery. She went through a long, risky surgery, and for a while, it looked like like she might pull through. Fans from all over sent thousands of cards, but 8 days later, she felt a sudden pain in her back. Her body gave out. Doctors tried for nearly an hour to bring her back, but they couldn't save her. Lucille Ball died on April 26, 1989. She was 77. The world lost one of its greatest stars. But even more than that, it lost a woman who had fought to stay seen, loved, and remembered, right until the very end.